Hi, this is Danielle, the domestic scientist, and in today's video, I'm going to show you how to create a traditional Christmas tablescape featuring an antique sled. So stay tuned. So true story, I happened to be out with my husband at several antique stores because I was looking for some items for upcoming videos. And I happened to see an antique sled in the corner of one of the booths, and I thought it would be perfect for a tablescape. Now my husband looked at me like I was absolutely crazy and said, "Why would you put a sled on top of a table?" Now this particular sled was in poor condition, so I decided to pass on it, but I kind of kept the idea in mind. We went to another store and then we saw this display, and I knew at that point it was definitely meant to be. So this particular store display is very full. They have a wreath sitting on top of the sled, and then they also have a scale and multiple reindeers, and so it's a very full look. Now I happen to like it for a store display, especially because they are selling all the merchandise on the table, but for me I wanted to scale it back a little bit more, simply because I really wanted to highlight the antique sled and I wanted it to really be the focal point. So when it comes to using this sled as a centerpiece, I think it's a great choice because it really grounds the space and gives me a confined area to decorate in. I also like the fact that it gives a little bit of height without being very visually heavy. Now I chose to embellish the sled with a lot of greenery simply because you use a sled outdoors and I wanted to keep the table slightly rustic. Also, I used these pine stems that I found at Hobby Lobby, and they are very affordable. And I find that just adding some stems, floral stems around your house can really give it a pop of color. It adds some extra decorative elements, but it's also very cost effective. So I'm using 2 pieces of pine on each side of the sled, and then I have another smaller floral stem that I sat right on top of that. I like it because it has a little bit of holly, but it also has that red gift, so it adds like a pop of color and just a little bit of whimsy. Now right in the center of the sled, I went for my apothecary jar set. Now I have used this particular apothecary jar set in my home office video, and I'll have a link in the description below if you want to see how I used it in the office in a very different setting. In the center of that, I just put some more floral stems, and that particular one is a little bit more pine based, so I like all the pine cones, and I think that it adds a nice touch of greenery. And I use the apothecary jar because again it's not visually heavy, so you can see a lot of space in between. It does not impede conversation, but it still adds that earthy rustic element to the table, and it really gives you an antique feel as well, because those apothecary jars are also period pieces. Now on either side of the sled I have small vignettes where I just paired a small tabletop Christmas tree with, on one side, an oil lamp that is actually functional and that is indeed a vintage piece, but on the other side I have a Chamberstick that is battery operated, so I think that it gives a little bit of balance as well. So for just a moment, I want to pay homage to vintage lighting, and for me, what I think it has done for my table. I happen to be inspired when it comes to this table of doing something vintage, and not just, in our lifetime vintage. I really wanted to take it back to like the 1800s level vintage, like I was going in. And when you see a lot of the cinematic adaptations of great literary works, or the most classic literary works like *Twas the Night Before Christmas*, and then of course Charles Dickens' *A Christmas Carol*, you really get inspired by just all of the period pieces and items and artifacts that you see. Now, I really wanted a top hat, but I didn't think the top hat really went with the table. But I knew that I absolutely had to have a vintage chamber stick. And I actually just didn't know what it was called because I am not, by any means a historian, but I knew that I needed to have it. And I happen to have a local store, home decor store that I like to frequent. They always have unique things that I haven't seen anywhere else. And so I'm always going in for those little things. Now, back in October, I had seen a display And I was looking at it and I said, man, this reminds me of something. And honestly, it reminds me more of Twas the Night Before Christmas. And I had seen this chamber stick. I just didn't want to pay the price, and I did not know that it was called a chamber stick. I had passed on it back in the fall, and then when this opportunity came up to do a vintage table as a part of a collaboration with a friend of mine, I just decided I needed to go back and find it. I went back to the store and they only had one, but they also had, so they had one battery operated one with the hurricane glass, and that's really what I wanted, because to me it's just more value to have the stick and the hurricane glass as well. But I happened to see just the plain chamber sticks as well, that where you can put a real candle. So this particular store had two different kinds, and I was so excited, but I'm also being very cost conscious about my table. So I called my mom and I put both of these items on the counter, and I asked her to pick one because I just really can't decide. So for me, I'm just so excited to have it, and I would say that doing a table like this I find to be very exciting because it really pushes you towards, I guess, your limits of creativity, and also for just procurement purposes. Now there's another piece that I would have loved to put on this table. When I look at my table, I feel like something's missing, and to me that's a little bit more color. I was really looking for like a vintage quilt that I thought would be a great table runner, and I so happened to find one. So I'm going to insert a picture of the quilt that I found. It is a gorgeous Christmas quilt themed table runner, but the cost of this table runner was $44, and I was like, I cannot pay $44 for a table runner, let alone a used table runner. Despite how beautiful it is, I just couldn't do it. But I am going to insert a picture just so you can see where I would have taken it, because I did want it to be a little bit more homey. I didn't want to go overly rustic, but I did want it to have an inviting and a homey type quality. But I am happy with what I was able to produce. So when it comes to the place settings on today's table, I kept the look very simple. I have 6 white placemats that I found at Home Goods, and those have like a textured sweater-like quality almost, and I really do enjoy those, especially for my fall to winter looks. I placed a charger plate, a candy red plastic charger plate on top of that because I really wanted to add a pop of color. And then I made an executive decision when it came to the dinner plates. Now I actually own a large set of plain white dinner plates that have a gold trim, and I believe those are vintage. I don't know the exact year that those were made. However, when I did put it with this table, I felt like it just fell flat, and that it for some reason it just didn't have the look that I wanted. Now I swapped it out with a more modern dinner plate, and it is a white dinner plate from At Home, and then it has some gold detailing on it, and it's all like pine themed, and I thought it just went with the table a little bit more. And because it has more decorative elements to it, I also opted not to use a salad plate because I didn't feel like I had a salad plate that would really do this table justice, and I didn't want to use like a red modern salad plate because this is a vintage table. So I cheated a little bit when it came to that vintage aspect on the dinner plates, but still I feel like I like the look that I produced. Now, what I like about this particular table as well is it is a foundational look. You could definitely build it up and add more to it if that's what you want. So for example, on a lot of my place settings, I will do like a place setting topper. I could have put some little mini gifts on there. I also contemplated like a small container of those preserves and things like that that you could give as kind of like party favors or something. I thought about those things. I opted to keep the table more minimal today, but if I wanted to build more on it to add more color or more texture, that's certainly something you can do with a look like this. And I like to keep my looks as versatile as possible so that I could potentially do this table every year and add something different to it or take it in a different direction. So instead of going with the woodsy and a rustic theme, I could theoretically put the sled back up and go a little bit more modern, or maybe a little more winter wonderland. The other option that I really considered for this table is actually switching out like my tan runner for a white fur. I was thinking about using some fur because then it would look a little more like snow, which would make more sense with the sled, and then I could do some reindeer also. I just opted not to do that for today just because I was really leaning more towards, the Charles Dickens aspect, and I don't know, when I was in a lot of the vintage stores, I was thinking more schoolyard, and so it just worked for me this way. But I like the fact that there's still versatility, and like I said, I could do it again next year. I could even do it again next week with, adding some other things to it. So I do think it is a worthwhile piece to get. Now, when it comes to these sleds, there are other things you can do with it, and then I have my haul video where I showed you kind of how I'm currently using it, but a lot of people are hanging them on their doors, and I've seen some great things on Pinterest. So I do think it is a nice versatile piece to have as well. Now, I want to point out that there's one other thing that I saw in my favorite home store where I got the Chambersticks, and that's where people were putting these old-fashioned sleds in their Christmas tree. I am going to insert a picture just so you can see how they did it, and I thought it was quite interesting and quite unique. So I definitely think that a vintage sled is a worthwhile Christmas decor piece if you can get your hands on one. So leave a comment in the box below and let me know what you think of today's table, and if you have any suggestions of things that I might want to add to expand the table. So today's video is a part of a YouTube collaboration. The host for this collaboration is Glamour Ellen, and she's just challenged a small group of ladies to get together and to do a vintage theme home decor segment, whether it be a table or a vignette, coffee table, whatever it is you might want to highlight. So I will leave a link to the playlist in the description box below so you can check out the other vintage inspired Christmas decor for the season. Now, I'm Danielle, the domestic scientist, and I have a lifestyle channel here on YouTube. If you liked today's video, be sure to hit that subscribe button and leave me a comment in the box below. I'll see you next time.